Welcome to Green Rocks. Today we're going to talk about climate change. Our previous episodes have been focused on the United States' excessive national debt. But today we're going to talk about a global problem. Our climate is changing. Our behavior as a human race is impacting our climate and driving the change. So what are we going to do about it? First, let's get into the science. So now let's look at some data. This chart shows the correlation between the temperature on Earth in blue and the atmospheric carbon dioxide in parts per million in red. And as you can see, over time, the Earth's atmosphere, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere changes over time. It looks fairly cyclical to me. And the temperature follows. If you note also around 12,000 years ago, we had an ice age, and that's when the CO2 was down around 150. And the highest here is well below 350 parts per million. And we don't stay at that high for very long. It's a pretty short peak at the high CO2 levels. Today, just for reference, our CO2 level is 420. Here's the same atmospheric CO2 in parts per million in blue, and in gray would be human emissions of CO2 over time. And you can also see that as human emissions went up, there was a corresponding increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. Some of this also was related to people. We had about 1 billion people on Earth in 1800, and we have over 8 billion people today. So we've cleared a lot of trees and other plants to grow crops and raise cows and feed people and housing. So eliminating those sinks for CO2 has also contributed to climate change and increasing carbon. You see two charts here. The parts in the past are history in black line, and then it varies with 5 potential solutions by the world. The light blue, very low emissions line is a Paris Agreement of 2015. As you may recall, the Trump administration pulled us out of that as soon as Trump got elected. The middle line in yellow is pretty consistent with today's climate agreements by countries. And the 2 red lines would be what would happen if we elected Republicans in the United States and similar thinking people around the world, and they would pull back on some of our climate commitments. So what do those 5 different approaches mean in terms of temperature increase long term? These are those same lines, starting with the light blue line on top and the dark red line on the bottom of this chart. And if we go out to the long-term best estimate, you can see the light blue top line, 1.4 degrees centigrade. That's a great place to be. We're more on path for the middle at 2.7 degrees centigrade, which is too much temperature change. When we started climate change and global warming 20, 30 years ago, we talked about 2 degrees centigrade. Since then, scientists have done more research and really feel like 1.5 is a much better place to be. So the point of all these charts are we're behind where we need to go. So when I talk to people about climate change, these are the common objections I hear. Boy, I mean, Al, you're talking 300 parts per million. That's less than 1%. That's a really small amount. You're telling me that can make that big of a difference? Well, when it's down to 150, we had ice ages. We're now at 420 and could be on our way to much higher numbers if we don't get moving. The Earth's atmosphere is clearly very fragile, and we have upset the balance of nature, and we need to change our behavior. So, but how do we know the carbon increase is due to human emissions? I would suggest you watch a YouTube video by Simon Clark called How Do We Know It Was Us? And he'll talk through the different types of carbon isotopes and why when we measure the carbon in the atmosphere, we can determine that it came from burning fossil fuels. We can't prove it came from burning fossil fuels. Yeah, but I believe the impact of climate change is overstated. So the carbon's going up. How do we know the impacts will be so bad? I agree, there certainly is a lot of sensationalism around climate change. Every time you hear a newscaster say we wouldn't have had that wildfire or that wildfire's because of climate change, that hurricane's because of climate change, they don't really know that. They're just firing from the hip, and really, I think their intentions are good. They're trying to create some fear or motivation for action. But I would also recommend the scariest science paper I've ever read, a YouTube video by Simon Clark. I think it's really important that we get our science information from science people and not from cable network news or a political party. They're both pushing an agenda, and scientists in general are not pushing an agenda. Yeah, but this is a global problem. What if we do our part and others do not? I don't know the population of Europe off the top of my head, but I can tell you the EU's asking themselves that question every day because they're moving and we're not. Or we just got started, maybe a little faster pace with some actions by the Biden administration. In the late 1980s, there was an ozone hole that occurred over the ocean, and it was determined that CFCs were the cause of that ozone hole. So what did we do? The world countries got together and banned the use of CFCs. They were used in refrigerants and air conditioning. They were used as a propellant in aerosol spray cans and as a propellant in foam insulation. Those have all been banned, and over time, it is expected that the hole in the ozone layer will heal itself. It takes time because the CFC refrigerants last for 100 years in the atmosphere. We need to do our part and just get started, and we can deal with climate change. Why should we help developing nations? Well, we've been the worst offender on CO2 emissions for the longest time. China's now number one and we're number two. This is a tough question, especially as we dive into our financials. We'll find out that we're not in great shape financially. Matter of fact, we're in horrible shape financially. We're going to have to figure this one out over time, and as we go through these videos, I'll try to point out some places where maybe we can help developing nations without really damaging our economy or our country. The great news about climate, even though we're behind, is 69% of Americans believe that we should get on a path to net zero emissions by 2050. That's based on this summer's Pew Research survey. 69% of Americans. That means a fair amount of the Republicans want to address climate change. So now we have to understand and watch, will the Republican Party pay attention to the Republicans that care about climate change? I don't know. We're just going to have to watch and see how they react. Now let's talk about our financial situation. First, I want to touch base on energy independence as well. One of the Republican positions is we don't need to address climate change. We need to burn more gas, and we need to develop more oil and burn it. Baby, burn, baby, burn. Well, the USA is the number one oil producer in the world. That surprised me. Maybe it doesn't surprise you. The USA is an exporter of oil. Well, why is gasoline so much money? I don't understand why it's so much higher. When Trump was president, it was in better shape. Well, that's because OPEC decided to cut production. If you think of the pandemic, not a lot of people were driving. Oil production was way down. Prices were way down because people weren't driving. And when that happens, those oil companies didn't make money. So now they got a chance to raise their prices and capture some more money, and so they're going to. So when supply goes down, if demand stays flat, then prices go up. That's basic marketing 101. The other thing to understand here is even if we drill, and burn our own oil, we are one of the highest cost producers of oil in the world. So if we want to have energy independence and we want to control the price of that energy, not OPEC, the answer is clean, green energy. It's our path to energy independence without foreign influence on the price of energy. And I just can't believe the Republicans won't get around that. Maybe it's got something to do with where they get their campaign funding from. I bet if you follow the money, oil and gas companies provide a lot of funding to the Republicans. There's no other logical reason for Republicans to defend oil the way they do. So now that we understand a little bit more about the science of climate change and have a great reference in Simon Clark to get scientific information from scientists, I want to talk about how we pull together climate change and our financial deficit to deal with both problems at the same time. We'll do this in our next episode when we talk about taxes and how I think we should increase taxes to get closer to a balanced budget. I look forward to talking to you next time. Have a great and safe week.